I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!
Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus. Good evening, Bowling Green, and hello to everyone on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and I'm here with my wonderful co-host,
Rebecca Wood.
Yes, and together Rebecca and I are going to craft a beautiful hour of radio for you. We're going to talk about ecology and the environment, and we're going to talk about it in the ways that it affects you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, all on this fantastic program called For a Green Future. And we have, as usual, a super high quality program lined up for you today. We're going to chat for the next 10 minutes or so. And please feel free to call in at any time, 877-909-1007. That's 877-909-1007. And then we have an interview with Tristan Rader, who is a representative in the Ohio House of Representatives. And he's going to be talking a little bit more about this constitutional convention that the Republicans are trying to sneak past everybody in order to rewrite the U.S. Constitution to their liking. Then it's advertisers and patrons, our fantastic supporters. And after that, Rebecca will have the mic. And Rebecca, what will you be talking about today?
Kodiak brown bears.
Ooh, Kodiak brown bears. Cool.
They're big.
They are.
Yeah.
They're amazing. I've seen them in the wild.
Ooh.
They're incredible. Okay, and then on to Ecological News. And as I said, hopefully at some point we'll hear from you. So, welcome to June 1st, 2025. And you may have noticed, if you haven't looked out the window yet, but we are surrounded by haze. This is one of those hazy days being caused by the fires up in Canada. And I talked a little bit about this last week, but even though it's been unseasonably cool for us right here in the Midwest around the Great Lakes, it has been equally unseasonably hot up in the northern parts of the continent there, up in Saskatchewan and Manitoba, where they are having an incredible wildfire season. There's 174 fires burning up there right now, according to the National Wildland and Fire Situation Report. 77 of those 174 fires are uncontrolled, burning uncontrollably. And so far this year, they've burned 1 million hectares, which is just about 681% above normal, meaning, just about 7 times as much fire. And the whole country is at what they call level 5, which means all their resources are being used to fully, and so they need help from other countries like us. Although, interestingly, on their website, they just said we're looking for international aid. They didn't actually mention the U.S. by name, which just sort of is kind of a backhanded Australian way of saying they're still mad at us.
Hey, Joe?
Yeah.
Well, do you know what the 3 routes out of Manitoba are?
I do not.
Marriage, crop failure, and the arts. I heard that joke. It was
Uh-huh.
told by a Canadian, I believe.
I see.
I can't remember. Maybe Red Green, maybe somebody else.
Well, there is now a fourth way because
Fire evacuation.
yes, because
Yeah.
tens of thousands of Manitobans are being flown out of the province in
Yeah.
airplanes because
Good.
their houses are burning down.
Good.
So they're number 4. Yeah. So now our reaction to this, I've actually heard one of the newscasters reporting on all this haze that's come down into the Midwest. They've already sort of normalized it. They've already said, well, it happens every year. No, it didn't used to happen every year. I mean, those of us who
Yeah.
are older than 10 years old can remember when it was really bizarre to get haze that so strong that it actually is cooling us. It was like 48 degrees this morning, according to my car. And the reason is that all this smoke is blocking the sunlight and cooling us down, even though it's still, super hot and dry up in the north. So it cooling us down does not prevent the wildfires up north.
I found myself, I was deveining spinach in the kitchen, and I suddenly found myself singing "So Long It's Been Good to Know You." I don't know who wrote that. I think it was, I know the version by Pete Seeger.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know who wrote it originally, but yeah, that's it's about the dust storms of the 1930s.
Yeah,
in
that might have
Oklahoma and
been
places.
that might have been Guthrie. Arlo
Yeah,
Guthrie's
I
dad
suspect
there.
him.
Yeah.
I suspect him. But yeah,
Yeah, that's a good song.
at least they didn't get gaslit about it on top of everything else. Back then they were like, oh yeah, this is really bad, very bad.
Yeah, right.
Everyone knew it was bad.
And that's a good tie-in to our last story. Or not our last story, one of our stories about farming in France.
Ah.
That remind me to tie that back into what you just said. So anyway, the reactions, like I say, it's being normalized by a lot of the media, and don't let it be. Don't
Yeah.
accept the fact this is normal, folks. It's not normal.
This is Abby normal.
Yes. But I also saw a Facebook post I wanted to comment on that's being shared widely, and this is being used by some people who promote themselves or present themselves as being like environmental caretakers. In the same post where they talk about the Manitoba wildfires, they say, but the green energy advocates say the solution is green energy, and no, that's not going to get us out of this situation. And that attitude, is really super unhelpful.
Yeah.
In Native American culture, like in the Iroquois culture, and if you read the Iroquois Constitution, because they had a constitutional democracy before we did, and we copied actually, we crib note, we copied a lot of their constitution when we wrote ours, but they gave people veto power. That is, they could say, okay, you don't do that solution, but only if they presented an alternative. Only if they said, okay, we've all agreed there's a problem, and some people have put forward this solution. I'm going to veto that solution because I think this other solution is better. And the people that are saying, we can't rely on green energy, or, don't believe the people who are trying to use crises like these to force us into green energy, they're not providing any other solution.
I think we should let them force us into green energy.
Yeah, exactly. And so just saying green energy is not the solution, but not doing anything else keeps us on this same path of increasing carbon emissions, which is going to kill us.
I think we should be all, ow, ow, you twisted my arm.
Right.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if this idea that rejecting green energy is coming directly from like the Oil Institute of America or the American Petroleum Institute, or if it's somebody who's saying, based on indigenous wisdom, I know we cannot follow that path. Okay, what path do we follow then? All right. So don't, if
better
they
have a better idea.
if
and
they
you
don't give you another option, go with the solution that is working all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
Wind and solar and storage are reducing carbon emissions all over the planet as we speak. And so most of the world, of course, and even most Americans, 70 to 80%, depending on the survey, we have agreed on the problem. But our legislature here in Ohio is uniquely focused on worsening worsening the solution. In other words, our legislature is promoting more carbon fuels, more oil, more gas, more nuclear, which is, of course, a bigger problem in its own in terms of long-term problems for the human race. But we have a political solution, or they have a political problem. And their political problem is that they know most people understand that the problem is real and we've got to do something about it because they see their own environment getting, changing every day, every year. And so part of what they've done is they've crafted this law called SB 1, which we've talked about before. And SB 1 does a lot of terrible things. It eliminates teachers' pay, or teachers' unions, for example, and collective bargaining is outlawed. It eliminates tenure in that tenured professors get everything they say reviewed by a political appointee who decides if their statements fall in line with the state-sponsored, the state-approved positions on things. And if they don't, their tenure can be reversed, which means there is no tenure. Because the whole point of tenure is you get to say what you want without that kind of repercussion.
Yeah.
So, and one of the other...
I was under the impression that, as someone from an academic family, that the point of tenure was to allow people with mental illnesses to work in academia so long as they don't decompensate before they get tenure. But never mind. Probably it's Joe's thing.
Yeah. I mean, there's the stated reason and there's the, practical reason.
Right.
But the idea behind tenure is that you've got people who've studied a particular subject for so long that they should be allowed to give their opinions publicly without fear of repercussion, like the repercussion that SB 1 actually puts into law. And one of the other things that it does...
So now it's just like you have to go through all the stress and write your dissertation and defend it and all this stuff just for no good reason because you just get to keep working there with no security.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And people don't realize how horrible the whole PhD process is. It's not just you're not just taking more classes like in high school, extra credit classes or whatever.
Yeah.
It's a huge life commitment. But
check on your friends in PhD programs. They are not okay.
Right. But the main, in my opinion, the biggest, horriblest thing in this SB 1 bill is this idea that it forces teachers in public schools to teach, quote unquote, both sides of every issue without distinguishing which side is right. In other words, now public schools are required to teach creationism and evolution equally without telling the students. But evolution is a scientifically proven, concept. And so that's the truth. They have to teach the creationism idea and the evolution idea and let the students decide for themselves, which is completely ridiculous because students decide for themselves anyway. You could teach them and tell them whatever you want, and then they'll make their own decision whether they're going to believe you or not.
When I was in 7th grade biology class, we learned what the scientific method is, which is that you have a theory and you set up a way to test that theory, and you either confirm or disprove or don't prove that theory.
Yes.
That's how science works. People don't know this. People think it's just people making stuff up. It isn't.
No. And the other main issue, controversial issue that they now have to teach both sides of is global warming. So they have to teach global warming denial. Public school teachers have to teach global warming denial the same as they teach global warming science, even though global warming denial is poppycock, is false, I don't know how many, synonyms for wrong you can say. Global warming denial is a fantasy, but they have to teach that fantasy the same as the actual physical science.
I have an idea, which I believe very strongly, which is that gravity is not real, and electricity is not dangerous, and therefore you can jump off of very tall things and tongue kiss electrical sockets. So they
Right.
need to teach that in the school too.
Well, if you could convince enough people to your positions to make it controversial,
Yeah.
this law would require that they teach that. So the situation is SB1 passed. The governor DeWine, excuse me, DeWine has signed it into law. But there is a petition drive going on right now that was organized by the professors at Youngstown State University. People are trying to get enough petition signatures to put it on the ballot. 250,000 they need by June 20th. And if they succeed, then it'll go on the ballot in the fall, and we, the people, will get to vote yes or no on it, because otherwise this will become law, and it will be a disaster for Ohio colleges, not just in the way of making our teachers basically subservient to the state, literally having to teach what the state tells them to teach, how the state tells them to teach it, but also in that no one's going to want to come here.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to go to, well, it's you, especially from like out of the state or out of the country, if they know that our schools are being run by our Republican-controlled government, which is being run by, as we know, energy interests and so forth.
Come here if you want to believe a bunch of nonsense that is some guy who's running the Ohio state government wants you to believe.
Yeah, I mean, we could get those people, but, they can go anywhere, frankly. All right, well.
How soon is it going to be till they force people in medical school to teach vaccines that vaccines are bad?
Yeah. Vaccines are a controversial topic.
They are, yeah.
So you would
we would be churning out doctors who think that vaccines are bad.
You have to
I've been
teach
taught that.
anti-vaccine science, quote unquote science, the same as you teach vaccine science. So you both have to say, okay, here's how vaccines work, and here's how they helped, prevent millions of deaths, over the decades. But also, and you have to teach that without distinguishing between the two and telling your students one is poppycock and one is actual science. So that is just a taste of what happens when you let one party, and to be fair, the Republicans have had absolute control of the state for 14 years now. And I'm not saying it would be any different if Democrats had absolute control of the state for 14 years now. I think it probably would be. But whenever you have one party with absolute control of everything for decades, you get this kind of ridiculous sort of corruption and trying to bend reality to match what their positions are, as opposed to trying to, change their position to match reality, because they don't have to. They know they've got absolute control. And so what they're trying to do is actually push this all the way to the federal level using the Constitutional Convention, using Article 5 of the Constitution to call a convention that will rewrite our Constitution from top to bottom. Bill of Rights, big X through it. Women's vote, there's talk about getting rid of the vote for women so they could repeal the amendment that gives votes to women. They could put back in the 3/5 rule in terms of, having black people vote, whatever. It's literally all up for grabs. And we've been reporting on this. We talked to a woman from Common Cause a few weeks ago about it, if you recall. And this week, I managed to land an interview with Tristan Rader, who he was elected to the House of Representatives this past election. He represents Lakewood, but he so far is the only legislator that I know that's actually raising the alarm on this issue, and it's a really important issue. So I managed to get an interview with him. Let's go to that interview now. Welcome to For a Green Future. Could you please share with us your name and what part of Ohio you represent?
Sure, happy to be here, Joe. Thank you. I'm Tristan Rader. I'm a state representative from the city of Lakewood and represent Lakewood in the near west side of Cleveland.
All right, great. And I invited you on today because you posted on Facebook that you're going to be voting against the resolution to call for a constitutional convention that would be SJR, Senate Joint Resolution 3, and HJR, House Joint Resolution 2. Could you please tell us exactly what these resolutions do and why you're opposed to them?
Yeah, so this resolution, you stated it perfectly and succinctly. It calls for an Article 5 convention of states, which would be used to essentially edit our Constitution. The convention could also choose to throw out the United States Constitution. That in itself is enough of a reason to give us pause. We're playing with fire here. If enough states, 34 states agreed, and right now there's a number of states that have already agreed to this. By depending on how you count, depending on which version of this resolution you're looking at, as many as 26 states have agreed to do this. Some say 29 states have agreed to do some version of this convention. So it's even though these resolutions are crafted narrowly. They say, oh, we only want to call for a convention to deal with term limits or to deal with a balanced budget, things that a lot of people would support. Um, the fact of the matter is these conventions are unproven. They're uncharted territory, and we haven't done one since the 1780s, and a little bit different back in those days. There's a lot of things that could go wrong, and we could really be screwing up our Bill of Rights if it's done wrong. So there's a lot of reasons to give pause, even if the intentions by some are good. I think that it could run away and it could be a very bad result. And one of the things we're worried about, and especially in these times, is that they would certainly go after the Bill of Rights, any number of those amendments, or add additional amendments to allow for additional terms for the president. This is something that it seems crazy we're talking about, but it's certainly something that this president has floated, and it's something their party is interested in. We know, and it's with Project 2025 being out there, we just think this is a very, very, very scary thing to be approaching.
Yeah, I think a lot of legal scholars kind of agree that the Constitutional Convention is sort of the ultimate authority, that it could actually overrule any state laws that tried to limit what it was going to do.
Exactly. Yeah, we could pass we have another bill in front of us that kind of dictates how Ohio would approach this. It's pretty narrowly crafted, and it's got some issues that it gives all the power to the majority and no minority representation, which I've brought up in committee before. But the convention itself could easily issue an edict that says all such things are null and void. This convention has all power, and it could proceed to do a number of things. One of the scariest sort of things about this is it's really being pushed by the far right. It's not only just a one party, but one faction amongst the party is in firm control of this, and they're funded by the Koch brothers and other powerful special interests that really just want to see the Constitution work for them and not for the rest of us. So that's really what this is about, right? It's about changing our government to work for the powerful and the elite, while the rest of us are out here, fighting over the table scraps.
Yeah, I've watched some of the testimony, and I think one of the scariest was one of the proponents, actual former U.S. senator, called for a repeal of the amendment that allows people to vote for Senate, to vote for their senators, and he wants instead for it to just be an appointment by the governor or whoever's in charge. And so I think that's kind of an example of the sort of anti-democratic thing we face here. Our show focuses on environmental issues, and so could you just sort of speculate on some ways that a constitutional convention could hurt federal environmental protections?
Oh yeah. So I think that specifically though even the narrowly tailored version that we have here in Senate Joint or House Joint Resolution 2 would be all about making sure the federal government was minimized. And we had speakers come before us that spoke very pointedly at the fact that the government shouldn't be mucking around in things like protecting us, right? Or providing health care or looking out for the environment that we all cherish and we need. So, those will be some of the first things you would see would go if I think they had the ability to even if they were just to keep this focus to what they were focused on and it didn't become this runaway convention that then really threatened the civil rights, it would certainly limit our ability as a federal government to do things like enforce things like the Air Pollution Act and would probably cease to exist. The EPA would cease to exist in its current form if a resolution like this were to pass and we were to have, and that's just the low-hanging fruit. That's the easiest thing to see would happen, right? So our environment is really caught in the crosshairs and the crossfire on this.
I think I'd like to ask you where this process is. I mean, how close are we to passage? Where are things in terms of hearings and being brought to the floor?
Yeah, I think we saw a pretty big outpouring of support for this, which is what urged me to, I don't speak super publicly on every single bill that comes before us. There's hundreds of bills that come before us. You have to kind of pick and choose in this what I call a target-rich environment, where we have a Republican trifecta, and they're, undoing lots of things that have helped people for a very long time. But this is particularly egregious in that I do see there being a groundswell of support kind of being whipped up by the far right, and they've been moving towards this for a long time. This bill has been brought forward in some way, shape, or form in several GAs, several General Assemblies over the last couple of decades. And last time that it actually passed, and these have passed in Ohio before, was in 2013. But any time that it comes up and that it passes just adds to that momentum that this whole movement gets across the country and just gets us that much closer to this, I think, what would be a catastrophic event of having a convention of states. HGR, HR, the first bill we talked about actually had its proponent testimony just last week, and I'm on the committee that hears this government oversight. So I had an opportunity to ask questions of some of the proponents of this bill. About 100 people showed up for that meeting. They overfilled the room. We had 80 something people submit testimony, about a dozen or so people testify. So I think it has momentum. These types of initiatives have passed in the state before. It's worth noting. 2013 was the last time that we passed a resolution calling for vigor behind this. Only adds to our worry that it's going to be used towards the ends of these, dark money groups that are funding.
Mm. Yeah, it's kind of ironic that the Republicans who make such a fuss about supporting the Constitution are actually looking to toss out the Constitution and replace it with a Constitution. They didn't take oaths to support a Constitution. They're supposed to be supporting the Constitution that we've got now. So we've had you on the show before, and you also part of your website says that you're a very strong proponent for alternative energy for renewable resources. Could you talk a little bit about that? And
Sure. Oh, I love talking about it. So you have to tell me to shut up if I go too long.
all right.
No, but my background's in solar, distributed rooftop, small scale, community solar type projects and program management, and it's just such a great tool to use to give people the power to generate their own energy. It's really a democratic principle, I think, that embodies itself and can embody itself in how we do our government, how we do our energy system, if we just allow it to happen. And so part of my reason for even being here, wanting to be in the legislature, is just to help kick that door open and allow solar and wind to compete here in Ohio, because we know when renewables compete, they win. And Ohio has been, and this is no secret, we've been behind on the energy transition, and we're behind on many things. But being the third largest emitter in the entire country as a state, we have to do a lot better to allow for these technologies broadly, whether it's utility scale, distribution scale, residential scale, so that people have the means of their own production back in their hands. They can start producing their own energy in a sustainable way, right? In a way that's actually going to lead towards a cleaner, healthier air, better water, a better environment for future generations. So I'm happy to be here and beat that drum. We're making some progress too.
All right. Yeah. And I think people may not realize, just how important a part of the whole energy transition the rooftop solar is, because one of the stories we're going to talk about later in the show is just the amazing progress in California, where the rooftop solar is actually not only providing tons of power, but it's also reducing demand, because at the parts of the day where the power demand is the highest, that's also when the solar produces the most. And so when there used to be a peak of power requirements, an expensive peak, there's actually now a little dip in demand. So we're way behind in Ohio on
That
that.
is absolutely right. Preach.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, actually, I think that's about all we've got time for. Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, just thank you for the time. Keep advocating, keep telling your folks, and anybody who's willing to listen, keep showing up. It matters. The state house is known for being a little bit insular, but without the voices of caring, passionate environmentalist activists, people who just care about the futures for themselves and their grandchildren and their grandchildren's grandchildren, just keep showing up because it matters.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Tristan.
Thank you, Joe.
That was our interview with Tristan Rader, another in our series of amazing, wonderful interviews with, people who are on the front lines of so many environmental battles. What did you think? Did you like it? There's always a chance to let us know what you think of our show. You can send an email to Joe at Joe DeMare, JoeDemare, Joe DeMare for agreenfuture.org. So I would love to hear your opinions. And do you think this is as serious a threat as Tristan Rader and Common Cause think it is? Or do you think, that the Republicans wouldn't do that? Well, let us know what your opinion is. Okay, now it's on time to hear from our advertisers and patrons. Imagine a place where nature meets adventure, where you can climb, paddle, fish, and explore. That place, it's right here in Wood County. The Wood County Park District is here to protect, preserve, and inspire. We conserve natural and cultural treasures so you can enjoy the outdoors like never before. By maintaining green spaces, providing fun programs, restoring wildlife habitats, and leading outdoor adventures. Want to connect with nature? Well, try your hand at archery, bouldering, geocaching, paddling, rappelling, and more. Whether you're seeking experience or a peaceful retreat, our parks are open every day from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset all year round. Come explore, get outside, experience nature. Your parks, your adventures waiting for you. Find us online at wcparks.org or follow us on Instagram, Facebook, or X, or you can call directly at 419-353-1897. That's 419-353-1897. The Wood County Park District, preserving nature, creating adventure, and inspiring a greener future. And of course, our show is also brought to you by our patrons. And our patrons are incredible people who have been there for us for so long, and they've gone to patreon.com. That's Patreon. There they found our site for a green future, and they picked a monthly donation level that matched their budgets, so they didn't have to suffer. No one should suffer for helping us, but if you want to suffer, that's fine too. They picked a match for their budget, and now every month a little bit comes out of their accounts and comes over to us, and that is how we can afford to keep this wonderful show on the air. Thank you so much to our patrons. We're very grateful. Okay, and we are also grateful for the shows, for the little bits of information that Rebecca shares with us each week. So what kind of wisdom are you dropping upon us this week?
Okie dokie. Well, I am very excited about Kodiak brown bears right now because we got to go on another experience, and it was at least as good as the lemurs.
Oh, at the Toledo Zoo?
Yes,
Ooh.
yes. Yeah, so we I think we paid, it was only like $20 plus the zoo entrance fee.
Okay.
For this one, and we all got to go into kind of a small auditorium, I'm going to call it, like what you'd watch a movie in, only the front seats were a bit further back from the literal screen. It was like except for it was like a steel mesh looking screen thingy. So, yeah, but we were just kind of sitting there, and the rule was that you had to, I don't know exactly how far it was from the bears area, but yeah, it was close enough that you could see them really well. And we were not allowed to get out of our seats at all, even to go to the bathroom for the entire time that the bears were in their little area adjacent to ours, because it was explained that this might make them nervous and cause aggression, and we, quote, didn't want that, unquote.
No.
So, yeah, I just decided to believe them about that. But, yeah, so we got to see them. Apparently, they use these sticks to point at different areas, and they're supposed to assume various positions. And they teach them to put their paws up with their claws so that they can both trim their claws, which they do with hoof cutters like you use on a horse.
Ooh, wow.
So they do that, and they examine their paw pads, and they just they turn them around to different positions because it was explained they have really big heads with a lot of angles and different things where, an injury could be hidden. So they want to see all different sides of their head.
Mm-hmm.
And they get them to open their mouths so they can look at their teeth, except the girl bears will do this. The boy bear and his brother, who lives at another zoo, will not, apparently. They just stick their tongues out.
Aha.
So,
Which is exactly what I would do if someone put me in a cage and told me to open my mouth. I would probably just stick my tongue out, too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and they reward the girls get honey out of a cup. Whereas the boy bears get the boy bear gets marshmallow fluff because he's very tall. He's like I forget how tall he was, 10 feet, I think.
Wow.
So yeah, it would just be too drippy. It would get all over the place, including on the keeper. It would be raining down honey. It would be bad. So marshmallow fluff is stickier and therefore safer for them to use. So it was a really cool experience. And they looked so adorable. You just wanted to pet them. But, that you had in the back of your mind that might not be a good idea. So, yeah, it was really
Definitely
fun.
not. Yeah, you could have achieved instant internet fame, but
Yeah,
at the
there was a
cost.
guy who, it turns out, it was a friend of mine who, I think in the 70s or 80s, dropped some acid and broke into the zoo and tried to become one with the polar bears, and he did, but not in the way that he in Toledo, not in the way he was hoping. So
Wow.
yeah, don't do that.
No.
No matter how warm and fuzzy and cute they look.
Good advice.
So
Were the male and female there at the same time, or what was it?
they were. They have 2 girls and a boy, but the girls are different. I believe there's some kind of inland species of brown bear. The boy is a Kodiak, and they already have sexual dimorphism, meaning that the females of both subspecies tend to be smaller. And also coastal bears, like Kodiak bears, who live on an island off the coast of Alaska, are usually bigger because they eat bigger food.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I would have thought that, the inland bears can, I don't know, just eat caribou or something, or mooses or something, but they're not, like most carnivores, they're actually surprisingly risk averse.
Mm-hmm.
And mooses can mess you up bad.
Right.
Even if you are a grizzly bear.
Yeah.
So
a nice big fat salmon is a lot safer to eat. Yeah.
And on the coast, the ocean salmon are bigger and fatter, and you got all kinds of little sea mammals running around Kodiak Island, and
Ooh, mhm.
actually
Nice
fairly
seal
large.
on the menu, perhaps.
Yeah, so the bears get bigger there. They get to a maximum of 10 feet, 1,500 pounds for the males. The females are 20% smaller and 30% lighter.
Wow.
Color range is from... So, yeah, you have a smaller species to begin with the female bears, and also they run smaller because of gender, or I guess biological. We don't know how they feel about their gender. So, we don't know what they're thinking, really. But, yeah. So,
Right.
yeah, but their biological sex is smaller anyway, so they looked like, the girl looked like a cub compared to the male bear. And one of the girl bears did not come in. Apparently, Dodge, the big male Kodiak bear, and the girl bear who came in are sweethearts and spend a lot of time together. Yeah. So yeah, their color range is mostly light to dark brown, but they can be blonde or even orange. According to the FWS.gov, Federal Wildlife Service, probably, they're called Ursus arctos middendorfi. This is the Kodiak bear specifically. They're 3 to 5 feet when down on all fours. Claws are 6 inches long. Males are 1.5 to 2.2 times the size of the females. And coastal bears can be 2 times as large as the interior grizzlies.
Okay.
They're heaviest just before hibernation in the fall. They're actually very quiet animals. You see on TV, you see them roaring a lot, but mostly they only do that when they are physically fighting. When they're having conflict, they'll do things like they'll make huffing noises to warn their cubs of danger.
Mm-hmm.
And to show anxiety, they make jaw clicking noises, or sometimes when males are following females.
Okay.
They'll do that. Kodiak Island is in Alaska, and it features marine, terrestrial, and freshwater habitats. So that's 3 different places where they can get their food. They have lots and lots of salmon. The bears disperse nutrients from the sea to the land because apparently dead salmon carcasses and bear poop are important in,
Right.
enriching the soil so that it can grow more stuff and more stuff. There can be more plants.
Right.
And things can eat the plants, and other things can eat the animals that are eating the plants.
Do bears
yada.
deposit nitrates in the woods?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go. They have harbor seals, sea otters, stellar sea lions, and various whales. I think they don't eat the whales, but pretty much anything else.
Oh, if a whale gets beached, they'll eat it.
Good point. Yeah. There's a kelp forest offshore, including bull kelp, which is a habitat for marine organisms. And it's also a key spawning ground for Pacific salmon. And for my zinger facts, we were told by the keeper that Dodge, the big male bear, often, quote, fails at being a bear, unquote, because he is frightened by butterflies and his own farts. Much like a dog. We've all seen dogs do that.
Okay.
It's got to be so much funnier when you see a 10-foot bear doing it.
Right. All right. Well,
Poor
thanks.
fella.
Thanks for that report,
He
Rebecca.
tries.
Yeah. Okay. Well, on to ecological news. Okay. And the first story is from the website esgnews.com. And ESG stands for Environmental, Social, and Good. And that's a form of investment where people with money want to make sure their money's invested in stuff that actually helps the world instead of hurts it. And so the title of the story, which ran on May 26th, EPA moves to eliminate federal greenhouse gas limits on fossil fuel power plants. And so essentially what's happened is the Trump administration is saying that they don't have to regulate CO2 or methane emissions anymore. And they claim the reason they give for this is they said there's no health or climate effects from methane or CO2 on the atmosphere. And
I
so
think there is.
yeah, you're not alone in that.
Yeah.
99.5% of atmospheric scientists agree that there are, and so the EPA is wrong. But this rule, if it goes into effect, would apply to all coal and gas plants in the country. And the other excuse is because they're saying that they're a small and declining share of global emissions. When, the UN says that coal and gas plants are, provide 75% of all greenhouse gas emissions and 90% of all CO2 emissions. And so, again, another gigantic lie. And this supports, this is part of what's going on with this tax bill that's in front of the Senate that also revokes all grants designed to reduce CO2. It removes all incentives for renewable power, solar and wind, and it gets, rid of all purchases of electric heavy-duty vehicles. And that's in addition to what Trump did his first week in office, which was mothball the federal government's entire fleet of EV cars, which are, that's a waste of tens of billions of dollars. And so this rule has been submitted to Trump for approval, and it looks like there's going to be a comment period starting sometime in the next month. And so we'll have to wait and see what happens to it. But, this is directly out of the whole, 1984 newspeak thing, war is peace, carbon dioxide is not greenhouse gas, et cetera, et cetera. So this is pretty bad. But I'm trying to counterbalance this terrible stuff with some good news. And this is from PV Magazine on May 27th. Solar and battery output record set as California continues aggressive ramp, which I thought was kind of interesting. An aggressive ramp. There's this plant, wild plant called the ramp. I've got pictures of armies of ramps marching out of the forest. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the good news is that solar set a new record. It was the fourth record in a row, basically on May 22nd, it supplied 21 gigawatts of power, just solar alone. And that's just the utility scale solar. And the rooftop solar supplied another 20 gigawatts. So solar on May 22nd supplied 41 gigawatts of power to the state of California. That's the equivalent of 41 nuclear power plants. Battery power also set a record. It supplied 10 gigawatts of power, the equivalent of 10 nuclear power plants. And on the day before that, May 21st, wind and solar together provided 28.2 gigawatts, which is also a record. And so what these, so this is both solar setting records and battery setting records. And so batteries are really coming of age in California. There's 214 utility scale batteries, and they supply about 13.2 gigawatts of capacity. That's 84% of the battery capacity. And then there's 250,000 home batteries, which are also tied into the grid. Together, they can supply 1.8 gigawatts of power, almost 2 nuclear power plants worth of power. And they supply 12% of the battery power that's on the grid. And so the great thing about these batteries means that there's zero what's called curtailment. That is, when the wind and sun are producing more power than the grid needs, it can just get dumped into the batteries. And the California now has 15.7 gigawatts of battery capacity. They're on track to meet their goal of 52 gigawatts of capacity by 2045. So just, hooray, California. They're doing it, even though, there's been changes in policies which have slowed things down, like the adoption of rooftop power. But so far, there's so much wind and solar there now that they're regularly proving that wind and solar can supply the fourth biggest economy in the world with all the power it needs for large chunks of every day. Okay, next story, and this is just a fun story. It was in the Smithsonian on May 23rd, and the title is "A Young Cooper's Hawk Learned to Use Crosswalk Signal to Launch Surprise Attacks on Other Birds." And it's just it was this story about a researcher called Vladimir Dinets. He's at the University of Tennessee. He's a zoologist. Published an article in Frontiers in Ethology. Basically, this Cooper's hawk learned that when pedestrians wanted to cross a busy street, they would push the button on a crosswalk, and that would set off one of those sound alarms, the sound. And so the Cooper's hawk learns, oh, hey, when pedestrians push that button, there's going to be a red light, and that's going to cause this huge lineup of cars. And so the hawk would fly into a nearby tree and wait until that line of cars got to be about 10 cars long. And then it would dive down and fly about 2 feet off the ground, using the cars as cover so that other birds couldn't see it coming. And so it would fly this whole length of the parked cars, take a right angle turn right into this yard where this family has the habit of eating their dinner outside on the lawn every night, for dinner.
Okay.
And so every day that leaves like crumbs and stuff
right.
that the prey species like to come and like pick over the yard.
Oh.
So
all right.
So
I
they're,
get it.
they're just having their little, dinner, breakfast, and all of a sudden the Cooper's hawk just zams in there and catches the prey species bird, because the level of intelligence this requires from the Cooper's hawk, you have to be able to understand what's going on when those pedestrians push the crosswalk button and have this big elaborate plan to catch the prey species. And it's just one of those examples that just shows us again that animals are so much smarter than we
Predators are
we
good problem solvers. They have to, and they notice patterns.
Yeah. So that's just a fun story in the Smithsonian back on May 23rd. Okay, we got a couple updates on Piketon down there, the Portsmouth waste reprocessing and uranium enrichment facility that we have been continuously reporting on because they're doing lots of horrible things. And there's a story, smell and burning lungs reported near Piketon Atomic Plant days before DOE's progress update. And that was a story on May 26th by the Ohio Nuclear Press. And essentially what's going on there is both they're enriching new uranium and they're continuing to dispose of the massive amounts of contamination created during the old program. And they're doing on-site disposal, which basically just means they dig a big hole and line it with clay. And they've already dumped 400,000 cubic yards of dirt into these cells and 200,000 cubic yards of debris, which is essentially the radioactive buildings and everything that was in them. And so they've built 6 cells so far. But on May 9th, residents reported an odor. And the reporter who did the story was there, and he said it smelled like pencil lead. And along with this smell came, as they say, burning lungs, headaches. And there's been no response from the companies that are processing this waste or creating the new waste by enriching more uranium. So we don't know what caused it, but it does not speak well of what's going on there. And as a support for that, our friend Vita Colley from Press, that is the Portsmouth Piketon Residents for Environmental Safety and Security, did a press release on May 29th that they actually were just issued a report that said from 1955 to 1987, 10,500 kilograms of uranium dust was released from this facility and floated around the neighborhood. 8,000 kilograms of liquid uranium wastes were dumped into the local waterways.
Oh, dear Lord.
And that's just uranium. That's 20 tons of uranium, which is highly toxic both radioactively and chemically. It's also chemically toxic. And that doesn't include things like technetium, chromium, and the transuranics, which we know were also produced and released there. But this is why they're having so much trouble down there, why that's the highest cancer rate in the state of Ohio, and why they had to abandon a school building because it got contaminated with plutonium, and why the contamination is spreading. The contaminated area is getting bigger and bigger, which is what tends to happen, especially when you get incidents like this one that was reported on by Ohio Atomic Press, where some sort of smelling and smelly emission was put out into the environment. We have no idea what. All right, next. But we're not the only ones, of course, with problems. I wanted to report on Ontario. It's called Bill 5, and this is up there in Canada, where they've got the Premier, Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario, and he has crafted something called the Protect Ontario by Unleashing Our Energy Act. And if that sounds suspiciously like something Trump would say,
yep,
that's not a coincidence. This is a report by actionnetwork.org. And essentially what this law would do is it would repeal Ontario's Endangered Species Act. It would exempt industrial projects from environmental review. It would erase archaeological and cultural protections because they have laws up there that say you can't just bulldoze over indigenous villages and burial grounds because you want to make a warehouse or something. It eliminates that, and it creates a process where the members of the cabinet, in other words, Doug Ford and his personally appointed 5 or 6 ministers of Ontario, can override any law. So the whole legislature can pass a law, and that then Doug Ford and his cabinet get to override it. Just say
so dictatorship.
Yeah,
basically. They've just become an advisory committee, your legislators that you vote for to make the laws.
Right, that you go through the whole legislative process. It take years to get good laws passed. Those laws can be in special economic zones. Okay, so, but they're the ones who get to decide where the special economic zones are, so you could just declare the whole province a special economic zone.
Right.
Yeah, and so British Columbia has a similar law. But essentially what's happening is the Canadian politicians are using the Trump as the excuse for advancing Trump's agenda in Canada.
Okay.
They're saying we've got to do all these terrible anti-democratic things to protect ourselves from Trump.
Sort of like us in communism in the 80s.
Yeah, but we have to do what Trump wants us to do to prevent Trump
Well, the
from
50s through the 80s.
controlling us. Right.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, we got two more stories and just 3 more minutes. So here we go. So back to good news. France 24, which is a YouTube channel, on May 25th did a nice story. Chemical-free farming brings life back to rural France. And essentially what happened is, this is one of those great stories where science and farming get together. In 2018, a bunch of environmental scientists found that there was very little biodiversity in the farmland in this area with 400 different farms in rural France. And so they linked it to using lots of farming chemicals and getting rid of all the hedgerows. And so these 60 researchers and 400 farmers got together, and they've started doing farming without chemicals and without plowing. They saw no drop in yield, in fact, 40% increase in things like rapeseed, and a huge increase in biodiversity. So it's working. It works great. Last story is actually quite a big story. I guess we're going to have to wait till next week to hear all of it. But just to preview, AmericanProgress.org, May 16th, House Republican plan to increase gas and electricity prices. Basically, Trump's tax bill will raise your gas rates and raise your household gas bill significantly by hundreds of dollars a month.
So if you see any large barrel or metal barrels anymore, might as well stop and pick one up.
Oh, you mean on the side of the road?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll get into the details of that next week because it's too important to ignore. But that's it for this week. This is Joe DeMare.
And Rebecca Wood.
Thank you so much for listening. We are signing off.
I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things a creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time